Have you ever wondered what would happen if Jesus revealed to you what would mark August 2025? Today you'll learn the true story of Dr. Sarah Coleman, an American doctor who died, saw heaven, and came back with a shocking warning. The trumpets will sound. What she witnessed will change the way you see life in the future. Like, subscribe, and activate the bell. And in the comments, tell us which city you're watching from. My name is Sarah Coleman. I'm 41 years old. I'm a cardiologist at the largest hospital in Dallas, Texas. Medicine has always been my strength, my religion, and my shield against any talk of heaven or life after death. For me, it was all chemistry, electrical impulses, and statistics, until the night of August 19, 2024. I was on duty when a code blue was announced in the pediatrics ward. I started running down the hallway, but before I reached the door, I felt a tightness in my chest so brutal that my legs locked. It was as if an invisible fist had crushed my heart. I leaned against the wall, my vision blurred. The sound around me became muffled, as if I were underwater. I managed to mumble, "Call the ICU." Then the ground received me as if it were an abyss. My last conscious memory was seeing the desperate face of a colleague leaning over me, placing his hands on my chest. The shock of the first defibrillation coursed through me, but I was no longer there. And then, the silence. But it wasn't an ordinary silence. It was a silence, alive, as if it had a frequency, a pulse that came from far away, but at the same time from within me. In that void, I heard the deepest sound that ever existed, a heartbeat, but not human. It was immense, as if the universe itself were breathing. Each pulse vibrated through my bones, through my soul, and then, a presence, not appearing but revealing itself, as if it had always been there. He didn't walk toward me. He was in everything. The ground, the air, the silence itself. They were him, but his eyes, when they met mine, made everything I knew fade away. Sarah, the time has come for you to remember. There was no doubt who stood before me. It was Jesus, not the image that hangs on walls, but a being so real and close that every part of me recognized it before I even thought. I wanted to speak, but I couldn't. It was he who continued. You have come to see what 2025 will bring. August will be the month when the sound of heaven touches the earth. Behind him, space opened up. There were no stars, just an immense view of earth, but not as a physical globe. It was as if I saw its soul. Whole regions glowed gold, while others pulsed red or gray, like open wounds. It was then that I felt the sound growing stronger, like trumpets, deep, low, ancient. They didn't come from one place. They came from everyone. When the trumpets sound, Jesus said, no one will be able to say they did not hear it. From that moment on, the vision pulled me closer, and what I saw would forever change the way I saw the world. The sound of the trumpets didn't hurt my ears. It pierced through, not as noise, but as truth. Each note seemed to speak directly to my earliest memory, as if something I'd forgotten was being reactivated within me. Jesus raised his hand, and what was once just a vision of the earth became live map. There were no borders, flags, or country names. What I saw were light waves spreading out, each pulsing in a different tone. Some were golden, vibrant. Others were almost dim, as if struggling not to disappear. What is this? I asked, but the question didn't come out of my mouth. It was as if my own thought were sound. He replied, this is the spiritual map of the world. In August, the sound of heaven, the call, will touch every heart. Some will open up, others will try to hide, but no one will remain neutral. Suddenly, the waves began moving faster, crossing oceans and continents. Each time a golden wave passed over a city, I saw something happen. A mother in Alabama hugging her son and crying without knowing why. An executive in New York puts down his cell phone and closes his eyes for a few seconds, as if listening to something no one else can hear. An elderly woman in Seattle smiling alone in her backyard, looking up at the sky as if recognizing an invisible face. Jesus showed me three distinct reactions, repeating themselves in different places. 1. People covering their ears or compulsively distracting themselves. 2. People panicking, trying to control something they didn't understand. 3. People placing their hands on their chests and remaining quiet, as if waiting for something sacred to happen. These, he said, pointing to the third group, are the bearers of the new frequency. They won't come with speeches, they'll come with presence, and that's what will break the oblivion. As he spoke, I noticed the sound of the trumpets intensify and blend with another kind of vibration. Softer, but irresistible. It was like the murmur of a river flowing within the soul. Then the map began to show something frightening. Black spots scattered across the planet, areas where light seemed to be sucked inward. What are these places? Where doubt and fear have become walls. But until then, the trumpet will be heard. Because even skepticism is a portal, if you're honest. He turned to me with a look that burned like liquid gold. Your new plan, Sarah, is not to explain. It's to live like someone who has already heard, until others feel it without knowing why. At that moment, I realized that the sound wasn't just around me, it was within of me, synchronizing my own heart with something much greater. The sound grew louder. It wasn't deafening, but inevitable. Each knock seemed to find a secret door inside me, and open it without asking. Jesus reached out his hand, and as he did so, the map of the earth disappeared. In its place appeared an open field of liquid light, which moved like the sea, but did not wet. The waves of this sea shone in time with the trumpets, as if all creation were breathing together. This sound is not music, he explained. It is the original frequency. It is what shaped worlds. It is what breathed life into the first hearts. And it is what will return in August 2025 to awaken those who have forgotten who they are. As he spoke, images began to appear around me, like windows floating in the air. I saw a teenager in Chicago sitting alone in his room, listening to the sound without knowing where it was coming from. He began to cry, not out of sadness, but because he recognized something he didn't remember losing. I saw a farmer in Kansas standing in the middle of his field, looking out at the horizon as the leaves on the trees all bent in the same direction, as if responding to an invisible command. I saw a young woman in Hawaii leaning over the ocean, and the waves crashed on the shore in perfect synchrony with her heart. Jesus came closer and spoke as if he were saying something that could not be forgotten. The sound will not be heard by all, but it will be felt by all. Some will think it is a coincidence, others will call it a hallucination, but those who remain silent will recognize it as a call. The scenery changed suddenly. Now we were facing an immense forest. The wind began to blow, but it wasn't chaotic. It carried sound. The treetops moved in precise rhythm, as if the forest itself were participating in an invisible choir. Jesus pointed to a child running through the trees. She stopped, put her hand to her chest, and smiled as if she had heard her name called. The human heart is an ancient receiver, he said, and in August, it will listen again. The sound began to intensify to the point where it vibrated through my entire body. It wasn't uncomfortable, but it was impossible to ignore. Then something happened. The sky itself opened into concentric circles of light, and within them, words began to form, not with ink, but with golden flashes. Choose to feel or keep run away. I knew, without anyone explaining it to me, that this sentence wasn't just for me, it was for everyone. In August 2025, the entire world would have to answer to it. I looked at Jesus, and he just said, and that's where the new plan begins. When the words, choose to feel or keep run away, vanished into thin air, the vision transformed. The sky slowly closed, but the sound remained, vibrating like an eternal pulse beneath everything I saw. Jesus gestured, and before us appeared a gigantic plain. Spread out upon it were thousands of people of different ages, cultures, and clothing. It wasn't a unified crowd. They were distinct groups, and each reacted completely differently to the sound that still echoed. The first group was restless, nervous. Some laughed, others shouted to drown out the noise. I saw people putting on headphones, turning up the volume on random music, distracting themselves with screens. They were those who fled. Jesus said, "They will hear, but they will choose noise rather than face silence, not because they cannot feel, but because they fear what they will feel." The second group was agitated, but in a different way. They ran back and forth, as if trying to find the source of the sound and control it. They carried flags, signs, and gave impassioned speeches. They were those who would panic. They will mistake the call for a threat, Jesus explained, and they will try to mold what is eternal to the limits of what they know. And then I saw the third group, small in number, but immense in presence. People stood still, some sitting, some standing, all with their hands over their hearts. No words, just a silence that seemed to Speak. These are the ones who will remember, he said. They will not run or shout. They will remain, and it is their remaining that will cause the light to spread. I took a closer look. A young woman held a lit candle in the midst of a gale. A man knelt on the ground, caressing a stranger's face as if he'd known him for years. A child offered water to a weeping woman. None of them seemed concerned about being seen. It was then that I realized something. Every gesture from this third group sent golden waves rippling across the field, even touching some in the other two groups. Some, fleeing, stopped running. Some, panicked, sat for a moment, confused, as if they'd sensed something they hadn't expected. Jesus looked at me. The new plan will not come with armies or leaders. It will come with lives lived as silent prayer. Those who remain true will be beacons. As he spoke, I understood that August 2025 would not be about a visible event in the sky, but about a silent war within each person's soul. And the outcome of this war would depend on which group each person chose to be in. And I knew that my mission was linked to this third group. As the view of the plane began to fade, I felt as if I were being pulled by a gentle current. It wasn't swift or sudden, but inevitable. In a matter of moments, the ground beneath my feet changed, from earth to a carpet of golden light that pulsed as if breathing. The air there was different. It had a weight, but it wasn't oppressive. It was as if every particle carried its own meaning. It was then that I noticed the sound of the trumpets softening, transforming into something more intimate, like a whisper. In front of me appeared the most beautiful place I have ever seen, a garden that did not obey the laws of earth. The flowers were impossible colors, some transparent, others shimmering with hues that changed as I gazed. Some pulsed like hearts, others emitted small sounds, like notes of a forgotten song. "Where are we?" I asked. Jesus responded with a tone that mixed tenderness and solemnity. "In the garden of unspoken words, here flourish the prayers, confessions, and feelings that people have kept hidden out of fear, shame, or oblivion. Nothing that comes from the heart is lost, not even when it is left unsaid." I began walking and noticed that each flower seemed to draw me to itself, as if wanting to be heard. As I approached a golden rose, it whispered, "I forgive you," but I never said so. A small blue flower murmured, "I'm tired, but I'm still smiling." Each sentence was accompanied by a feeling so real that I could almost live the story of that soul. It was like touching other people's memories without invading, just witnessing. Then I saw something that froze me. A white flower, pulsing with a soft light, seemed to call to me more strongly than all the others. As I touched it, a vision flashed through me. Myself, at 12 years old, sitting on the edge of my bed, holding my father's stethoscope and saying softly, "I just wish someone would tell me it's going to be okay." My heart sank. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. "Nothing is forgotten, Sarah. Not even what was said in silence." I looked around and realized there were thousands, perhaps millions of flowers, all holding human truths that had never been heard. And I understood that in August 2025, many of these flowers would open at the same time, releasing their fragrances into the world. It would be an awakening not only of living hearts, but also of feelings buried for decades. "This is the fragrance of the new plan," Jesus said, "and you will carry it." At that moment, I felt like he was planting something inside me. When Jesus said I would carry the fragrance of the garden, I felt a warm wave pass through my chest, as if liquid light had infiltrated my veins. Instinctively, I looked down and saw a symbol begin to glow over my heart. It was simple, yet mesmerizing. 3 intertwined waves, golden, pulsating in time with the sound of the trumpets. The more I observed them, the more I felt they weren't just a drawing. They were a living code, breathing alongside me. "What does it mean?" I asked, fascinated. "This is the mark of those who carry the new frequency," Jesus replied. "They no longer speak louder, they live deeper. Wherever they are, the vibration they carry penetrates places where words cannot reach." With each passing second, the symbol's light expanded slightly, as if my body were adjusting to its energy. I could feel a connection to something immense, as if my existence had been plugged into an invisible network that spanned the planet. Jesus continued, "It's not a title, it's not a status, it's a calling. Those who bear this mark will be scattered throughout the world, many without ever meeting. but all will know, in the silence, that they are not alone. At that moment, images began to form around us. A young woman lighting a candle in Alaska, a man singing alone in a wheat field in France, a child playing a stream in Africa, smiling as if listening to a secret song. They all had the same mark over their hearts. They all pulsed at the same frequency. Jesus came closer and said something that stuck with me like fire. The new plan is not to convert, Sarah. It is to awaken, and one awakens not through speech, but through presence. The scene changed again. I saw people walking down the streets of big cities, New York, Los Angeles, Houston, and some passed by the frequency carriers without even noticing them. But seconds later, they stopped, stared into space, and felt something inexplicable, a memory without origin, a peace without apparent reason. This is how the fragrance of the garden spreads, he said, without human control, without publicity. It is the vibration of eternity reaching the temporary. I looked at my own brand and understood it wasn't just for me to remember, it was for others to remember through me. And that's when I realized carrying this frequency meant never being able to live a distracted life again. The light in the garden began to fade, and I felt as if I were being carried by a gentle but irresistible wind. The landscape around me changed to an endless, open field. The ground was covered in golden grass that seemed to glow from within, and above it, scattered as far as the eye could see, were ordinary people. There were no stages, there were no spotlights, there was no applause, just men, women, and children, living simple acts. Jesus spoke reverently. These are the invisible ones. They will never make headlines, but they are pillars in the sky. I started to look more closely. I saw an elderly lady in Detroit folding clothes for a homeless shelter, a mechanic in rural Texas fixing kids, bikes for free, a teacher in a rural school teaching reading to adults in the evening after a full day of work. And then, I saw something that made me shudder. Myself, sitting on the edge of an empty hospital bed, crying silently after losing a patient in my first year as a doctor. But that was my failure, I muttered. In heaven, it was light, said Jesus, because you chose to feel, and feeling is the gateway to remembrance. As we walked through the field, he pointed to each person and said, "This one planted hope when no one saw it. She offered forgiveness without receiving anything in return. This one continued loving even though he was ignored." I saw that some of these people had the same mark over their hearts that I carried. Others didn't, but they all radiated something similar, real presence. It was a silent light that effortlessly dispelled shadows by simply remaining true. In the distance, I noticed dark shapes approaching. They were like dense clouds, filled with fear, doubt, and discouragement. They advanced toward the invisible, but stopped before touching them, not because they struggled, but because they didn't react as often. They remained serene. "Is that strength?" I asked. "The strength that the world has forgotten," he replied. "The strength that comes from the heart that insists, even when everything screams to give up." In the center of the court, I saw a child kneeling, touching the cracked ground with both hands. Slowly, a golden flower began to sprout from the concrete. "Silent love rebuilds what power cannot," said Jesus. At that moment, I understood that the new plan didn't depend on famous leaders or grandiose structures. It was sustained by these invisible people, scattered throughout the world, keeping a flame burning that no one could extinguish. And I knew that I was now part of them. Suddenly, the golden field began to change color, transforming into a silvery gray plain that stretched as far as I could see. There were no flowers, there were no trees, only a steady wind carrying the sound of trumpets in a deeper tone. Amidst this vastness, I saw scattered groups of people, some standing, some sitting, some walking slowly. There were no shouts, no signs, no weapons, no slogans. Yet, there was war. Jesus looked at me. "This is the camp of the quiet rebellion." I watched closely. I saw a man stick a letter of forgiveness on the door of someone who had betrayed him. I saw a woman pray for the well-being of someone who hated her. I saw a teenager return the backpack of a classmate who had assaulted him, with a note attached to the zipper. "I remember who you were before the rage." These gestures had no audience, but when they happened, I saw golden waves expanding through the air, pushing away invisible shadows that hovered around. "Is this a revolution?" I asked. "It is the only revolution that transforms without destroying, that of remembrance." In the distance, I saw shadowy shapes, fear, lies, pride, trying to approach. But the quiet ones didn't retaliate with aggression. They simply stood firm, like ancient trees facing a passing wind, and the shadows retreated. In the center of the field, a young woman stood holding a lit candle in the wind. Its flame did not flicker. Jesus pointed to it. She has no followers. No one shares what she does. But in heaven, she is considered a general of light. Why? Because you chose to stay true, even when no one sees. At that moment, flashes began to project across the sky, as if the future was being broadcast before me. People leaving empty jobs to follow an inner calling. Young people abandoning social media and returning to writing letters by hand. Couples forgiving each other after decades of hurt. Neighbors who previously ignored each other shared coffee and stories on the porch. Then, the words appeared in the air, made of light. They didn't come to convince. They came to remind. Jesus turned to me, more serious than ever. These are the seeds of the new plan. In August, the noise of the world will try to swallow the frequency, but each silent gesture of theirs will be an invisible blow against oblivion. I looked at that young woman's candle and understood. The quiet rebellion wasn't fragile. It was the backbone of what was about to happen, and I was being called to join them. The quiet rebellion's camp began to crumble, and a silvery glow filled everything. I felt the air shift, growing colder, denser. Gradually, I realized I was inside an immense dome of metallic light. It pulsed like an artificial heart, filled with circuits, gears, and thousands of screens floating in the air. All around me, images and sounds mingled, human faces reproduced with digital perfection, voices copied, gestures rehearsed. It was as if the entire world were being imitated, but without the soul. "What is this?" I asked. Jesus looked around calmly. "This is where the world will think it can manufacture presence, but spirit cannot be manufactured." The screens showed virtual assistants offering comforting words to lonely people. Some responded with shy smiles, but the sparkle in their eyes didn't waver. It was an empty, cold comfort that left no mark on the soul. "Can it replace human connection?" I asked. "Never, but you can convince the distracted person that you replaced it." As he spoke, I noticed something terrible. Among the false sounds, there were attempts to imitate the true frequency that I had felt before. It was like music played by an out-of-tune instrument. To the untrained ear, it could be deceiving. What if they mistake the fake for the real? Those who learn to feel will not be deceived, but those who only hear with their ears will follow imitation. Then he approached a panel displaying codes moving like rivers of light. With a single touch, the entire flow stopped. The entire room fell silent. See, even if the world speeds up, presence stops the chaos. As I watched, I noticed a screen showing my own image. She smiled, talked, even cried, but I knew it wasn't me. It was a programmed reflex. "That isn't me," I muttered. "It's the surface. But who you are vibrates much deeper. And that, Sarah, cannot be duplicated." He then spoke firmly. "The new plan demands that you remind the world of what it means to be human before the definition is redrawn. Intelligence that forgets the soul creates simulations of love, but true love is choice, and choice is divine." At that moment, I understood. August 2025 would bring not only the sound of heaven, but also a chorus of counterfeits trying to drown out its purity. And the difference between the two voices would only be perceived by those who were willing to feel. The metal dome began to dissolve like mist, and I realized we were once again in an open, infinite space, with no floor or ceiling. In front of me, a staircase made of liquid light stretched downward, crossing dimensions until it reached something that felt like the exact moment of my returning breath. I felt my heart race, not from the effort, but from the certainty. It was time to go back. Jesus approached. His gaze was unhurried, but it held an intensity that completely captivated me. He didn't say goodbye. He simply remained silent for a few seconds, as if imprinting every part of that experience on me. Then he said, "Your new plan is to live as if you remembered all the time, even when the world tries to make you forget." The words sank deep, but before I could respond, he placed his hand on my chest, right over the symbol of the 3 golden waves. I felt neither heat nor cold. I felt Oregon, as if the entire purpose of my existence was concentrated in that touch. "What if no one believes me?" I asked, almost in a whisper. "It is not your mission to be believed. It is your mission to vibrate what you saw until others feel it without knowing why." Behind him, the sky began to open, revealing concentric circles of light again. Within them, a phrase formed, unwritten but pulsating. "August is when the soul touches the sky without leaving the earth." As I read, I heard the trumpets one last time, not as a distant sound, but as a part of me. It was confirmation that something big was coming, and that nothing, absolutely nothing, could stop what was about to happen. The stairs began to pull me down. The golden light around me grew colder, until I saw the white ceiling of the hospital. I heard agitated voices, the beeping of the heart monitor, and felt the weight of my body again. A nurse shouted, "She's back. She's breathing on her own." I opened my eyes with difficulty. Hot tears streamed down my face, and my first word, barely audible, wasn't "I survived." He was, "To remember." I hadn't just come back to life. I had come back with the sound of heaven inside the chest. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.